It stuns me that a member of Congress would have listened in on that conversation. Absolutely stuns me. I just thought that that might be sacred.
He crushed this congresswoman for her shameful, selfish political grandstanding.
It's a very, very personal, intimate moment, and she's wrecked it.
The White House is following me and my wife. I'm a rock star now.
Tonight we completed the first step toward replacing our broken tax code.
This is the biggest thing we can get done, and that is to lower taxes for everybody, to make our country competitive again.
Threats of nuclear war intensifying as North Korea state media warns of an unimaginable strike against the U.S.
What was it like when you held him for the first time?
I mean, it was the most emotional thing I've ever experienced.
About Friday night, which is on the other side of 2 days.
That's right. If you've had a long week, guess what?
Like you with your boyfriend.
Tonight, yeah, you can have cold beer and fried chicken.
Right, and by the way, Johnny Joey Jones is works publicity for them.
Love him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he does. That's right.
For Zach Brown.
That's right.
So if you ever see him at a concert, he's working.
He's a double amputee who fought for our country. He's an amazing man. He's going to join us later on.
Yep. Well, thank you very much for joining us on this Friday morning before Friday night and the beer drinking, as Ainsley put it. Listen, if you were watching yesterday, midday here on the channel, you saw one of the most incredible performances from the White House briefing room. There he is, the Chief of Staff, John F. Kelly, had a powerful defense of the president's call to that Gold Star widow.
Yeah, there's so much that he went over, and it was impromptu, and it was heartfelt, and he went over every facet of the Gold Star debate from a first-hand perspective, being Chief of Staff, a former commander in the Marines, what it's like to put somebody into the field of battle and knowing that they will not come home, and then number three, to fully put in context why the president said what he said about past presidents, about what it means to make phone calls, and more.
He is a Gold Star father. Listen to what he had to say yesterday. It's extremely powerful.
Who are these young men and women? They are the best 1% this country produces. Most of you, as Americans, don't know them. Many of you don't know anyone who knows any one of them. But they are the very best this country produces. And they volunteer to protect our country when there's nothing in our country anymore that seems to suggest that self-service to the nation is not only appropriate but required. But that's all right. Typically, the only phone calls the family receives are the most important phone calls they can imagine, and that is from their buddies. In my case, hours after my son was killed, his friends were calling us from Afghanistan, telling us what a great guy he was. So some presidents have elected to call. All presidents, I believe, have elected to send letters. My first recommendation was he not do it because it's not the phone call that parents, family members are looking forward to. He asked me about previous presidents, and I said I can tell you that President Obama, who was my commander-in-chief when I was on active duty, did not call my family. That was not a criticism. But then he said, you know, how do you make these calls? If you're not in the family, if you've never worn the uniform, if you've never been in combat, you can't even imagine how to make that call. But I think he very bravely does make those calls. But let me tell you what I tell him. And let me tell you what my best friend, Joe Dunford, told me, because he was my casualty officer. He said, Kel, he was doing exactly what he wanted to do when he was killed. He knew what he was getting into by joining that 1%. He knew what the possibilities were because we're at war. And when he died, in the 4 cases we're talking about, Niger, my son's case in Afghanistan, when he died, he was surrounded by the best men on this earth, his friends. That's what the president tried to say to four families the other day. I was stunned when I came to work yesterday morning and brokenhearted at what I saw a member of Congress doing.
So you understand why President Trump said what he said. I don't think other presidents have done it. Not to brag, but to say, I've been through the deliberative process with my chief of staff. You wonder why what he came up and said when he said that, President Obama never called General Kelly. Not that he was putting down President Obama, President Trump wasn't when he mentioned that. It was because he asked General Kelly because he was trying to get some context and trying to decide whether he wanted to make that phone call or not. And that's what President Kelly, that's what Chief of Staff Kelly was saying.
He was just trying to explain what the president meant, his good intentions.
Sure, and keep in mind, a couple of days ago when we heard this Florida congresswoman say, the president said to the widow, your husband knew what he was getting into, the reason he said that was because John F. Kelly told him the story about how General Dunford had told him that's what he says. But what was stunning about what has happened in the last couple of days, according to John F. Kelly, was just the fact that during one of the bleakest times in this widow's existence on this earth, when she was getting a phone call, a personal phone call from the President of the United States, there was a member of Congress eavesdropping on that private call between the President and the grieving widow. And that's the woman who made it political, in John F. Kelly's words. And you know what? She is now saying that Niger was Donald Trump's Benghazi. So clearly, she has made this political, and John F. Kelly is heartbroken over it.
Right. So not only that is it not his Benghazi, Niger should be investigated, and it is being investigated over 4 things. And most Democrats don't believe there was anything wrong about Benghazi except for the outcome, but not about what led to it and how it was handled after.
All right. Well, General Kelly said he was stunned, he was brokenhearted that this congresswoman down in Florida, who has not ever served our country out in the battlefield like his son had, like he had, and like the poor 4 individuals that were killed in Niger, she came back and she said after John Kelly, after this press conference, Representative Wilson down in Florida, she said, John Kelly's trying to keep his job. He will say anything. There were other people who heard what I heard.
All right. Well, so you're going to tell me that General Kelly, you look at his track record, you see his presentation, you understand his background, anyone would order him out there, as some have accused? They say the president forced him out there. You're going to tell me that anyone forced him out there to speak from the heart without any notes?
I tell you what, you check out on Twitter, there are a number of people from the political left who say, look, he's not a general anymore. He's working for a president. He was the Secretary of Homeland Security, and now he was sent out there. Listen, here's the thing. Suddenly, Frederica Wilson, everybody's talking about her. Her people came out and said, you know what, she said enough. She's not going to say anything else regarding this. However, before that came out, she said this.
You mean to tell me that I have become so important that the White House is following me and my wife? This is amazing. It's amazing. That is absolutely phenomenal. I have to tell my kids that I'm a rock star now.
Highly inappropriate. She is laughing. She is loving the fame. You know, this is not about her. This is not about the president. This is not about politics. This is about remembering the men and women who have answered the call of duty, who have sacrificed everything to fight for all of us, for our freedoms. It is about being respectful and remembering them as they are dying on the front lines for all of us.
So Tucker was smart enough to book Ollie North, who knows the general quite well, to get a perspective on how extraordinary it was to see the general, now Chief of Staff, come out and talk about what he experienced personally. Let's listen.
One of the questions that was asked was, the day that you left the White House had to be the worst day of your life. And my answer was, no, the worst days of my life were when I held dying Marines in my arms. And then I had to write to the families. And then sometimes go see them after I came back myself. And what presidents go through in trying to express their condolences is such a personal and such a private and such a difficult thing. I find it stunning that somebody could criticize the president for doing what he did. I mean, Widow Johnson received a call that no one ever wants to get.
Yes.
No one ever wants to see somebody walking up their walk with a chaplain with him. And those kinds of things happen too often in war. It's a very, very personal, intimate moment, and she's wrecked it, is what she's done. She's a wrecker. Now, this Congresswoman Wilson is a wrecker.
One of the other things that General Kelly said during his briefing, and it was so powerful, was just the fact that he had spent an hour this past week trying to get his head around how this had suddenly become political. And he went out to Arlington and he walked among the headstones, and he said some of the names of the Marines there were because of him, because what he told them to do. And he thought, you know what? At least there is one thing left in America that is still sacred. When somebody who wears the uniform dies, right? Well, it was until this week. Watch.
When I was a kid growing up, a lot of things were sacred in our country. Women were sacred and looked upon with great honor. That's obviously not the case anymore, as we see from recent cases. Life, the dignity of life, was sacred. That's gone. Religion, that seems to be gone as well. Gold Star families, I think that left in the convention over the summer. But I just thought the selfless devotion that brings a man or woman to die on the battlefield, I just thought that might be sacred. So I still hope, as you write your stories, and I appeal to America, that let's not let this maybe last thing that's held sacred in our society. A young man, young woman going out and giving his or her life for our country. Let's try to somehow keep that sacred. But it eroded a great deal yesterday by the selfish behavior of a member of Congress.
You know, if you hear that, don't be discouraged. When I heard that at first, I thought, yeah, my grandparents, the greatest generation, as they're called, where are those days? And then I thought, America is still great, and that's why a lot of people elected President Trump, because they believe in country.
Right.
When we go out for these book signings, we meet the greatest Americans. We meet people that watch us every single day, and it gives me hope. It does. Raising a child, I think, listen to General Kelly. He's the White House Chief of Staff. I mean, he's a strong, amazing man.
The president tweeted last night at 11:15, I think we should put this whole thing to bed.
I do too.
Lastly, we'll talk about the wacky Congresswoman, a personal call. Everyone, I think most people who watch that and sees her agrees, but I think everyone should stop tweeting and talking about it.
I agree, because it's taking away from the men and women who died for our country, and that's what this is all about. And then General Kelly, he said when a service member is killed, after they've followed orders on the battlefield, he wants to keep their service respectful and sacred, as you just heard him say. But he went on yesterday, if you missed the press conference, about the process when someone dies for our country.
So powerful.
He talked about their bodies being wrapped in whatever passes as a shroud. He said their bodies are put on ice and they're flown to Europe and then to Dover Air Force Base, where Dover takes such good care of these bodies. They're embalmed, they're meticulously dressed in their uniforms with all of their medals that they have earned.
Right. The general gave that context, so the people out there know what our men and women who wear the uniform go through the final step of their lives. It was very powerful. All right.
Meanwhile, overnight, the Senate taking a major step toward putting more money in your wallet. So, what needs to happen next to make the economy great again? The answer is next.
All right. Fox News alert, overnight the U.S. Senate taking the first step toward tax reform by passing a budget framework. Yet some economists say that tax plan won't do anything unless the next Fed chairman does a few specific things. Here to break it down is Daniel Geltrude. He's a business and finance expert. He joins us live today. Dan, good morning to you.
Good morning.
All right, step in the right direction by the House, rather the U.S. Senate last night.
Absolutely.
Passing that framework.
Need tax reform. Got to have it. Without that, the economy sputters.
Okay. When you look at the economy, historically, you go back 50 years ago, the economy was growing at something, and we've got a big graphic right over there. 3.3% was the economic growth rate in America between 1947 and 2013, and now it has slowed way down. Obviously, one of the ways we've got to do things, because it's only been 2.1% since 2013, is good economic policies, and the Fed head is the person who has a lot to do with that.
Yes. They're the face of the central bank, and that face needs to be a poker face. So really what it comes down to, steady hand at the helm. We need somebody who really understands the monetary policy, which the president has made very clear. It's about growth. How do we get it? Right. How do we sustain it?
Well, the big question is when Janet Yellen's term expires, will the president appoint her for another term, or will he get rid of her? Because when he was out on the campaign trail a year ago, he said, you know, if I'm elected, most likely I'm going to replace her. Do you think that's a good idea?
I think that the president made that statement at the time because that's what he felt at the time. He may want to re-examine that, and I'll tell you why. Look at where the stock market is going. To make a change right now at the Fed chair level, if that's going to put that a little bit out of balance, I'm not sure he wants to take that chance. So I wouldn't be surprised if he goes back on that one.
So you're saying that out on the campaign trail he said, I'm going to fire her if I'm elected, and now because of the stock market, it's humming along? He'll keep her, even though, thanks to the Federal Reserve, we're sitting on all that debt?
I think so, because we're talking about $5 trillion worth of building wealth since he's become president. That's significant. So we could look at this situation and say, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. He may step back from that. Wouldn't surprise me, Steve.
Interesting. If he were going to replace her with somebody, one of the names that we've heard a number of times is Gary Cohn, the guy who used to be at Goldman Sachs, real smart guy when it comes to money stuff. Think that's a possibility?
It is possible, although lately, you know, in the horse betting, he's kind of fallen behind. He was one of the real favorites related to if tax reform goes through, he may very well be the guy. But not so sure now.
All right. Dan, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Steve.
All right. Have a good weekend. All right. Straight ahead, President Trump is closer than ever to keeping this campaign promise, we are told.
We are building a wall on the southern border, which is absolutely necessary.
Well, the wall prototypes, there they are. They're up, but illegals are already trying to break through them. We're going to tell you that. And Ainsley meets the newest member of the Trump family. She goes one-on-one with new parents Eric and Laura Trump next.
Good Friday morning to you. Back with some quick headlines and a Fox News alert. Moments ago, U.S.-backed Syrian forces officially declaring victory over ISIS in Raqqa, Syria's capital. This as we see brand new disturbing video showing nothing but rubble left in the city. ISIS once using Raqqa as a base to plan international terror attacks. The fall seen as a major symbolic blow to that terror group. Also breaking right now, North Korea sending a daring new threat to the United States, warning of a, quote, unimaginable strike. This coming in response to the U.S. and South Korea ramping up joint naval exercises. CIA Director Mike Pompeo saying the rogue nation is just months away from perfecting its nuclear powers. Guys.
All right, Jillian, thank you very much.
All right, well, we were invited for an exclusive visit to Laura and Eric Trump's house.
The nursery?
That's right, to meet their new little baby boy, first time ever seen on camera. His name is Luke, but before we met Luke, we talked a little politics with them. News of the day. Watch. Roger Goodell recently had the meeting with all the owners of the NFL teams, and he encouraged all the teammates to stand, but it said he's not going to punish them if they decide to take a knee. What's your reaction?
Listen, I think our reaction is you stand for the flag. And there's many injustices in this world. We see them every day. You flip on the TV, you see them, right? But that is a sacred minute where, you know, the best of America is showcased and celebrated. You know, the troops of this country are represented. All the things that are wonderful about this nation. I mean, we have so much to really thank God for. You don't stand during that period of time. And I think personally, and I'm not speaking for my father, but personally I was disappointed.
I think he could have been a little bit stronger, and I think he's going to see. We've already seen the fans have reacted, and people in this country do not take kindly to people disrespecting the flag, disrespecting the military, and you know, they will pay for it probably by losing fans, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Father was criticized for the conversation that he had with the Gold Star widow. Yeah. What were your thoughts on that topic?
I think it's disgusting. I mean, I think it shows the absolute worst of politics. Here's the President of the United States calling to express his condolences on behalf of an incredibly grateful nation, and people turn it into a political item. And to me, it's disgusting.
You read the transcripts. What were your thoughts?
From what I've seen, this is just a clear case of the media not doing their job. Whenever you read exactly what he said, your husband went into battle, you know, knowing that he